My only son emptied out every dollar I had put away for the end of my life, 148,600 of it, and handed it over to his wife's mother, like it was a gift card he found in a drawer. And 11 months later, everything that boy owned and everything he was licensed to do was gone. And all of it came down to one telephone call, 6 minutes long, that I made to him on a Friday morning with my hands shaking so bad I had to set the phone on the table. Now hang on with me 1 second before I take you into it. I want to know who's out there listening tonight, so drop the name of your city down in the comments, just the city, and I'll read it out loud myself at the top of the very next story. I do that every single time, and thank you for giving me this stretch of your day. I don't take that lightly. I really don't. If that like button and that subscribe are anywhere in reach of your thumb, go on and get them, because that is the only reason a little channel like mine keeps breathing. Okay. So, let me just put you right in my kitchen, because that's where the floor gave out. It was a Tuesday, in the middle of October. I know it was Tuesday because Tuesdays when I do the mail, I let it pile up in a wicker basket by the door and then go through the whole stack at once. So I'm at the counter in my robe and I open an envelope from Sentinel Retirement Group, which is who held my money. Not a statement. A letter. Cream-colored paper. Real signature at the bottom. Thank you for your instruction to fully surrender contract number ending in 4711. Your surrender has been processed. Funds were disbursed by wire on June 11th. I read it 4 times. My first thought was, this is somebody else's letter. They made a mistake. That happens. So I found the 800 number and sat on hold 19 minutes listening to that little marimba song they all use, and a young woman named Priya picked up, and she was very kind, which somehow made it worse. I said, "Honey, I think you all sent me somebody else's letter." She goes, "Let me pull that up for you, ma'am." I hear her typing, and she goes, "Okay, Mrs. Hupner. I do show that contract is fully surrendered in June." I said, "No, that can't be right. What's in it?" $0.11, she said. Everybody says their stomach dropped, and that's not what it was. It was like somebody reached in through my ribs and took hold of something and squeezed. My ears went hot. I remember staring at a magnet on my refrigerator shaped like an ear of corn, like it was going to explain something to me. And I said, "Who took it out?" And Priya got careful with her voice, the way people do when they know they're about to hand you something heavy. And she said, "The request came from your attorney in fact on the account, ma'am. Do you want me to read you the name?" I said yes, even though I already knew. Of course I knew. Grant Douglas Hupner. My son. And here's what kept me up that night. There was a second page in that envelope, folded behind the first one, and I didn't look at it until 11 o'clock when I couldn't sleep and went back down to the kitchen in the dark. And what was on that second page told me this was not one bad decision in one bad week. It told me somebody had planned for me never to find out at all. But let me back up. You need to know the shape of my life before all this, or the rest of it won't land right. My name's Loretta Hupner, 64 years old, northeast side of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Little brick ranch off Maple Crest with a walnut tree out back that stains the driveway black every October. Jean and I bought it in 1986, and I've never lived anywhere else. Jean worked at the GM truck plant down in Roanoke for 29 years, second shift most of it. I did payroll at a plastic supplier off Adams Center Road for 34 years, and when they moved everything to Mexico, I ran the money order counter at the Kroger on Maple Crest for 5 more years, just to get to Medicare. Jean died in 2019. Pancreas. 14 weeks from the day the doctor at Parkview said the word to the day I stood out at Covington Memorial in the rain. He was 61, so that money. It was Jean's life insurance, $90,000 of it. My 401k that I rolled over, and the last $22,000 was mine. Put away $140 at a time out of a paycheck while I ate saltines at my desk so I wouldn't have to buy lunch. That was the entire rest of my life sitting in one number. And Grant, my only child, 35 when this happened. I need to be honest with you here because if I paint him as a monster from the start, you won't believe the rest. He was a sweet kid. He carried my groceries in from the car without being asked. He cried harder than I did at his dad's funeral. He had to sit down on the steps of the church. And in 2021, when I had an aortic valve replaced at Parkview Regional, he sat in the recliner in my hospital room for 3 nights and didn't shave. And that's how it happened. 2 weeks before that surgery, we went to a lawyer's office on Illinois Road, and I signed a durable power of attorney. Because that's what the smart, responsible person does. Everybody tells you to do it. Nobody tells you what it is you're handing over. I signed a piece of paper saying my son could do anything with my money that I could do. Grant's wife is Kaylee, married 6 years. She works the front desk at a dental office out in Aboite. She was fine. She was always fine. And Kaylee's mother is Nadine Prater. Nadine lives up in Huntertown. 58, dresses like she's 38, posts those little squares on Facebook with cursive writing on them, blessed and highly favored, that kind of thing. Never held a job longer than 2 years and always got something going. At Kaylee and Grant's wedding reception, she cornered me by the cake table to sell me skin cream. At my husband's funeral luncheon, in the church basement, with the ham still on the table, she asked me what I was planning to do with the insurance money. At his funeral luncheon, I let it go. I told myself she was just awkward. I was polite. I have been polite my entire life, and I want to tell you where polite got me. Polite got me to a kitchen counter at 64 years old with a letter in my hand and $0.11. Okay, that second page. It was a change of address confirmation. Sentinel had my mailing address changed in April, 2 months before the wire, to a post office box in Huntertown, Indiana. So every statement had been going somewhere else since April. The only reason that one letter reached me is that a surrender confirmation goes to the address of record on the original contract. Some compliance thing. A crack nobody planned for. I was never supposed to know. I was supposed to be a woman who found out at 80, in a nursing home, when the money didn't come. I got in my car at 7:40 the next morning, drove out to their house in New Haven and stood in the driveway while he was loading his laptop bag into his truck. He saw me and his whole face did this thing. He knew, instantly. That's how I know he'd been waiting for it. I said, "Grant, where's my money?" He said, "Ma, let's go inside." I said, "I'm not going inside. Where is my money?" And he put his hands out like he was calming a dog and said, "Okay, it's fine. It's in a real estate deal." A real estate deal. I said, "Whose real estate deal?" He wouldn't say it. He looked at the garage door. So I said it for him. I said, "Nadine." And he goes, "It's not like that. It's a legitimate holdings company. They buy properties on the southeast side and rehab them and rent them out to Section 8. The returns are like 14%. Ma, 14%. Your annuity was doing 3. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be thanking him. I said, "You had no right." And he said, "Actually, I did." That's the sentence. If you take one thing out of this whole story, take that one. My son stood in his own driveway on a Wednesday morning and told his mother. Actually, I did. And then Kaylee came out on the front step in her scrubs, with her arms crossed, and said, "Loretta, you're getting yourself worked up. You know how you get since the surgery." Since the surgery. Yeah, that's the game they were playing, and they'd been playing it for months without me in the room. I called my sister-in-law Deb down in Bluffton, and she got real quiet, and then said, "Honey, Kaylee told us at Easter you were having trouble keeping track of things. Said you called her twice about the same thing in one day. I never did that. That never happened." My neighbor Faye Dombrowski, across the street from me since Reagan, told me Kaylee stopped by in the spring and asked her over the fence, real casual, whether she'd noticed me leaving my garage door open at night, salting the ground for months, before the wire, while I was making them a pot roast. They spent half a year building a version of me who couldn't be trusted to notice the money was gone. And I did what anybody would do. I went to the police. That morning was the lowest I've ever been, and that includes the 14 weeks with Jean. I put on a blouse, I did my hair, I took my folder and waited an hour and 10 minutes in the lobby at the Fort Wayne Police Department downtown, and a detective came out. Decent guy, maybe 40. Took me back to a little room and actually read the whole thing, slow, then set it down and rubbed his eyes. And he said, "Mrs. Hepner, is this your signature on the power of attorney?" I said yes, and he said, "Did anybody force you to sign it?" I said no, and he blew out a breath and said, "Ma'am, I'd rather you hear this from me. With a valid, durable power of attorney in place, your son had legal authority to move that account. What you've got looks like a civil matter. You'd need a lawyer to sue him. Sue him. With what? With the money he took. I said, so he can take everything I have, and that's legal. And he said I didn't say it was right. I said it's going to be hard. I got out to my car in that garage off Clinton Street, and I did not cry. I got mad first, and then about 4 minutes later I did cry. The ugly kind with the heater running. 64 years old, 34 years of payroll clerking, and a man with a badge just told me there was probably nothing anybody could do. That was the first time I thought about letting it go. I sat there and genuinely thought, maybe I sell the house, move into one of those apartments off Stellhorn, never speak to my son again, and that's my life now. What pulled me back out was so stupid. It was the Yukon. 2 Saturdays later, I'm at the Kroger, my old Kroger, coming out with 2 bags, and there, in the fire lane, is a brand new GMC Yukon Denali, white dealer plate still in the back window, and Nadine Prater climbs down out of it in a fur vest with a coffee. She saw me. She absolutely saw me, and she gave me a little wave. A wave, with the fingers. I stood there with my cart, and something in me went cold and quiet. Because I did payroll for 34 years. I have spent my whole working life looking at numbers that are supposed to add up and finding the one that doesn't. And Nadine Prater has never in her life had Yukon money. I went home, opened my laptop, and started doing the only thing I've ever been good at. The Allen County Assessor puts property records online. Anybody can look. Then I went downtown to the city-county building on East Main and stood at the counter in the recorder's office with a woman named Charlene who had reading glasses on a beaded chain, and I said, "I need everything recorded against this parcel this year. $12 for the copies. Best $12 I ever spent." Nadine Prater had a mortgage on that Huntertown house. And on June 16th, 5 days after my wire, somebody paid it off. Release of mortgage, recorded, stamped, dated. $81,000 and change. Satisfied. Then I looked up Proctor Legacy Holdings in the Indiana Secretary of State's business search, because Grant had said Holdings Company like it was a real thing. Registered in March, 2 months before the wire. Registered agent Nadine Prater, principal office. That same post office box in Huntertown my mail had been redirected to. I laughed out loud in my empty house, and it was not a nice laugh. Then I went looking for the properties. The Southeast Side rehabs, the 14%. There were 2, one on Oxford Street, one off Pontiac. I drove down the next morning and parked across the street. One had plywood on the front windows and grass past the porch rail. The other had a burned-out back half. You could see sky through it and a city of Fort Wayne unsafe building notice zip tied to the fence. I got out and took a picture of it, and my hands shook so bad the first two came out blurry. That was the 14%. That was my whole life. Now I'd love to tell you that's when it turned. It didn't. It got worse first, and it got worse because Nadine Prater came to my house. A Sunday afternoon, first week of December. Doorbell, and there she is on my step in a camel coat holding a coffee cake from the Kroger bakery. Still in the plastic clamshell, price sticker and everything. She goes, "Loretta, honey, can I come in a minute?" Woman to woman. I should have kept that door shut. I let her in. 64 years of being polite. It's in the bones. She sat at my table, set that coffee cake down and never opened it, and talked for 4 minutes about how hard this has been on Kaylee, how Kaylee cries at night, how families get twisted up over money, and it's such a shame. Then she leaned forward, put her hand flat on my table, and the whole voice changed. She said, "I hear you've been downtown pulling paperwork." I said, "That's public record, Nadine. Anybody can look." And she smiled at me. She actually smiled. And she said, "You know, my friend Vicky does senior transitions, helps families when a parent starts slipping. She says the sad part is the parent never has any idea it's happening. Everybody around them can see it and they can't." I said, "Get out of my house." She stood up real slow and buttoned that coat, and at the door she turned around and said, "Loretta, you're out here all alone, no husband, one kid, and that kid is married to my daughter. You think about that before you keep going." And she left the coffee cake on my table. That was the first time I understood I wasn't fighting my son. My son was the hand. She was the arm. 9 days later, I got served. A man came to my door on a Thursday afternoon with a manila envelope, said my name like a question, handed it over and left. Petition for appointment of guardian over an incapacitated adult. Allen County Superior Court, Probate Division, filed by Grant D. Huppner, son. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. I stood in my own doorway and read the words about myself. Confusion, repetitive phone calls, difficulty managing financial affairs, concerns following cardiac surgery in 2021. Attached, a letter signed by Kaylee describing incidents that never happened, and another signed by a woman named Vicky, senior transition consultant, saying she had observed me in my home and had concerns. She'd never been in my house in her life. Nadine sat at my table for 11 minutes with a coffee cake, and that's what got written down as an observation. You see what they did? A guardian controls my money, my house, my mail, everything. And who was asking to be the guardian? Grant, the same man who took the money. If a guardian gets appointed, there's no theft anymore. There's just a confused old woman and the son who's been managing things for her all along. They weren't hiding it. They were trying to finish it. I called 4 lawyers. 3 wanted a retainer of $5,000, and one of them, when I explained that the money in question was the money I'd have used to pay him, actually said, "Well, that's the problem, isn't it?" The 4th was Indiana Legal Services, a young attorney named Marisol Vega, and about 90 seconds into my explaining, she said, "Stop, hold on. Are you telling me the person petitioning for guardianship is the same person who used the power of attorney to liquidate the account?" I said yes, and she said, "Mrs. Huppner, go get a pen. That woman changed my life." And the first thing she told me was the thing nobody at that police station had told me. In Indiana, financial exploitation of an endangered adult is a crime, not just a lawsuit. And the Adult Protective Services unit for our district doesn't sit in some office downstate. It's housed right inside the Allen County Prosecutor's Office. Real investigators with subpoena power behind them. A power of attorney is not a blank check, she said. It carries a fiduciary duty. He's required by law to act in your interest and keep your money separate from everybody else's. Wiring your whole retirement into his mother-in-law's brand new company so she can pay off her own mortgage is a breach of trust. And in this state, over $50,000, it's a felony. I sat down on the edge of my bed and didn't say anything for so long. She said, "Ma'am, are you there?" I said, "I'm here. I've just been carrying this by myself for 4 months. The investigator's name was Wanda Pruitt. 50-something, reading glasses pushed up in her hair, drank Diet Right out of a can. She sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours and looked at every piece of paper I had, and when she got to the recorder's printout with the mortgage release, she went quiet, tapped it twice with her finger and said, "You did this yourself." I said, "I did payroll for 34 years. She said, "Mrs. Huppner, I've got investigators who don't build a file this clean. But understand where we lose these. We lose them because the family says the parent consented, and it's your word against theirs. Paper shows us where the money went. Paper almost never shows us what he knew." I said, "So what do we need?" She said, "We need him to say it out loud." And I had no idea in the world how that was ever going to happen. Grant had blocked my number, wouldn't answer the door. His lawyer told my lawyer all communication would go through counsel. So here comes the worst day. And I mean the worst. The guardianship hearing. Allen County Superior Court, Probate Division. A Tuesday morning in February. Cold enough that the salt on the courthouse steps crunched. Marisol met me out front and straightened my collar like a mother would. And it went badly. I sat in that room genuinely believing I was about to lose everything, in public, in front of my son. Their attorney was smooth. He didn't attack me, that's what made it awful. He was gentle. He kept saying, "Nobody here is saying Mrs. Huppner isn't a wonderful woman." He put my medication list up. Every single thing I take since the valve, the beta blocker, the sleeping pill I took maybe 8 times in 2 years. He asked, "Isn't it true you left your garage door open overnight this past spring?" I said, "One time, because the sensor was bad and I got it fixed." He said, "Thank you," and sat down like I'd handed him a present. Then Kaylee testified. Cardigan tissues, crying, saying I love her so much, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. We've all watched her decline since Jean passed, and I'm so scared she's going to hurt herself. I looked over at Grant, and my son would not look at me. He sat there and looked at the table. The magistrate was a woman in her 50s, and I watched her face, and I could tell. She was leaning their way. She started asking me questions directly. What year is it? Who handles your bills? And she wasn't being cruel. She was doing her job. But I could feel it going. And she said she was inclined to appoint a guardian ad litem, set the matter for a full evidentiary hearing, and continue temporary financial oversight in the meantime. Temporary financial oversight. To him. I sat in the hallway afterward on one of those wooden benches and couldn't get my breath right. Marisol crouched in front of me and said, "Loretta, this is not over. We'll get the evaluator, and the evaluator will clear you." And I said, "And what if she doesn't? What if I'm the only one in the room who knows I'm fine? Because that's what it does to you. 200 pages saying you're losing your mind. And even you start to check." All right. Now the phone call. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang at 4:15, and it was Grant. Unblocked. First time in 5 months, I did not pick it up. I watched it ring out, and my chest was going like a bird. He left a voicemail. 90 seconds. He sounded like he hadn't slept in a week, and what he wanted was for me to sign a letter his lawyer had already written, and would I please just call him back. I played it for Marisol that night, and she went quiet, and then said, "Loretta, he wants you to ratify," meaning he wants you on paper saying you approved it all along, because if you consented, there's no crime. And then she said the thing, almost like an afterthought, the way you mention the weather. She said, and by the way, Indiana is a one-party consent state. If you're on a call, you can record that call. You don't have to tell him. It's completely legal here. I didn't sleep that night, and what scared me wasn't getting caught. It was that I'd hear his voice and turn right back into his mother. 35 years of that. You don't switch it off because a lawyer told you the law. Friday morning, 8:40. I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I never touched, opened the voice memo on my phone, hit record, set it face up on the placemat, and called my son. And it almost fell apart right there. It rang and went to his voicemail, and I hung up and sat there thinking, well, that's it. I only had one of these in me, and I just used it. 2 minutes later, he called back, and I nearly dropped the phone reaching for it, and all I could think was, is it still recording? And there's no way to check without hanging up on him, so I had to trust it and pick up. And he said, Ma, thank God, please just listen for 1 minute. I said, I'm listening, and it came pouring out of him. The credit union had gotten a subpoena. Compliance pulled him into a room. He was on administrative leave, and he needed one thing from me, a ratification letter, saying I had authorized and approved the June transfer, that I understood it at the time, that I ratified it now. And he said, if you sign it, this all goes away. There's no crime. If you consented, Ma, I'm licensed. Do you know what that means? This ends me. And I made my voice small and tired, the way they all thought I was. And I said, Grant, honey, did you know it was going to Nadine's mortgage? And there it was. He said that was supposed to be short term. She was going to put it back in 90 days. I said, so you knew. And he said Dwayne had a whole thing set up, okay. The flip on Oxford was going to close in September, and it would have all come back, and you'd never have even known it moved. Never have even known it moved. I said, why'd you change my address, Grant? And he was crying now. And he said, because I knew you'd say no. And then I asked the last one, and my hands were flat on that table. And I said, and the court thing, the guardianship, do you really think I'm losing it, sweetheart? And my son said, no. No, Ma, that was Nadine's idea. She said if you had a guardian, it stops being theft. I said, okay. He said, so you'll sign it. I said, send me the letter. And I hung up and stopped the recording. And my thumb shook so bad it took 3 tries to play the file back. And when I heard his voice come out of that little speaker saying, because I knew you'd say no, I put my head down on my arms on that table. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt like somebody had died, because in a way somebody had. There's a version of my son who walked out of the room during that call and never came back. Then I called Marisol and then Wanda Pruitt, and Wanda said, don't touch it. Don't email it. Don't do a thing. I'll be at your house at 8 in the morning. 6 minutes. 22 seconds. Here's what it bought. Wanda took that recording to the prosecutor's office. They already had the wire trail. Now they had intent. Him admitting he redirected my mail because he knew I'd refuse, and admitting the guardianship petition was filed to cover the theft. Marisol filed the transcript in probate court, and at the next hearing their smooth attorney stood up and asked to withdraw as counsel. Right there. The magistrate, that same woman, read it, and her whole face changed. She dismissed the guardianship petition with prejudice, which means it's dead, and they can never bring it back. And she said something from the bench I still hear at night. She said this petition appears to have been filed as an instrument of the very harm it claimed to prevent. Kaylee started crying in the gallery, and this time nobody handed her a tissue. Grant was charged with exploitation of an endangered adult and theft. Over $50,000. That's a level 5 felony in Indiana. He pled. His new lawyer tried for a diversion, and the prosecutor wouldn't hear it because of the recording. 3 years, 18 months to serve, the rest suspended to probation, plus restitution for the full $148,600, joint and several with Nadine. But that's not the part that ruined him. People always think prison is the end of it. It isn't. Grant was a licensed mortgage loan officer. That license took him 7 years to build. And under the federal law that governs loan originators, anybody convicted of a felony involving fraud, dishonesty, or breach of trust is barred from ever holding it again. Not for 5 years. Not until he's rehabilitated. Permanently. The one job he ever loved, the thing he used to call me about when he closed a big one, gone for the rest of his life. 35 years old. Now Nadine, she fought it. Hired a lawyer out of Indianapolis, posted on Facebook about being persecuted, blessed, and highly favored, all of it, until her lawyer made her take it down. She pled to a level 6 and got probation and community corrections, which made me sick at first. But here's the thing about a restitution judgment. It's a judgment, and we went after the property. The Huntertown house, the one my money paid off. Allen County holds a sheriff's sale the first Wednesday of the month in a room in the courthouse annex, and I sat in the back in a folding chair with my purse on my lap and watched it get sold. Nadine was there. 3rd row. No fur vest. She had a manila folder she kept opening and closing. When it was over, she came up the aisle, stopped at my row, leaned down and hissed at me. "I hope you're happy. You took a home from a family." And I said, "Nadine, I sold my husband's truck last winter to keep my furnace running." She didn't have anything for that. She just walked out. The Yukon went back to the dealer. The finance company unwound it because of how it was bought. And I'm not proud of how much I enjoyed hearing that. Dwayne Hostetler, Nadine's boyfriend, the contractor, the man with the whole thing set up. Turns out Prater Legacy wasn't his first one. 2 other families over in Whitley County. So he took a deal and testified. And I was in that courtroom on the 2nd row and watched him do it. He wore a shirt with a collar and kept touching it like it was choking him. The prosecutor walked him through the wire, the mortgage payoff, the 2 dead houses. And Dwayne answered in that flat voice men get when they've already decided to save themselves. Then the prosecutor stopped, looked down at his notes and said, "Mr. Hostetler, of everything available to you, why that account? Why that woman?" And Dwayne looked out into the room. Not at me. Just out. And he said because Nadine told us the mother wouldn't fight. The whole room heard it. Nadine's lawyer put his pen down. The mother wouldn't fight. He got 4 years. And I sat there with my purse in my lap, thinking about a woman in a fur vest waving at me with her fingers in a fire lane at the Kroger. Kaylee filed for divorce 9 weeks after the plea. 9 weeks. Didn't even wait for him to report. And she came to my house one time, in October, almost a year to the day from that letter, and stood on my step and said she wanted me to know she never really understood what her mom was doing, and she felt terrible. And I thought about that cardigan and those tissues, and I'm so scared she's going to hurt herself. And I said, "Kaylee, you told a judge I was losing my mind." And she said I was in a really hard place. And I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I just closed it. She lives with Nadine now, in a rental up in Huntertown. The restitution comes in at whatever a man can pay working a warehouse off Ardmore with a felony on him. About $260 a month. I'll be in my 90s before it's whole, and it's never going to be whole, and I know that. But I want to tell you about the part nobody puts in these stories. The first night after the guardianship got dismissed, I came home and sat down on the couch with my coat still on and breathed out. And I mean, I actually heard myself do it, this long, shaky breath, and I realized I'd been holding my shoulders up around my ears for 11 months. My jaw hurt. I'd been sleeping 4 hours a night with my phone face up on the nightstand in case somebody came for my house. That night I slept 9 hours, woke up, and the house was quiet, and the light was coming in over the sink, and I drank my coffee hot for once. I got the furnace replaced in November. $6,200 out of what I had left, and the installer was a kid with a neck tattoo who called me ma'am about 40 times. And when that warm air came up through the vent in the hallway, I stood over it like an idiot with my eyes shut. That's what it feels like. Not fireworks, a working furnace, and 8 hours of sleep. He writes to me, Grant. 11 times now. They're in a shoebox in the closet in Jean's old room, and I've read maybe 4, and people ask me all the time, are you going to forgive him? Like it's a switch on a wall? Like there's a right answer, and I'm just being stubborn. I don't know. Some days I miss him so bad, I have to go sit in the car. Some days I remember him saying, actually, I did, in his own driveway, in the cold, to my face. And I could set that shoebox on fire. Both of those are true at once, and I've stopped trying to make them agree. Here's the only thing I'd tell you, and then I'll let you go. Everybody told me signing that power of attorney was the responsible thing to do, and maybe it was. Nobody explained that trust and access are 2 different animals, and that you can love somebody all the way and still make them show you the paperwork. Ask for the statements, get them mailed to your own address, in your own name, and open them. That's just paying attention. There's no shame in it. And what actually got me took me a long time to work out. Greedy, I could have survived. Half the people walking around out there are greedy. What got me is that a woman sat down somewhere and did the math on my whole life and decided I wouldn't fight. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's what happened. Thanks for sitting with me through it.